What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Great League once again, and the team we're going to look at today is Dugong, Shadow Altered Giratina, and Shadow Gligar. Now, the reason I put this team together was actually based on Dugong. I was looking at Pokemon that could break the Gastrodon Corviknight core that I was seeing so often during Go Battle Day, and I decided to run Dugong because it's just one of the safer picks that does well neutrally into both of them. With that ability to Icy Wind debuff. And then to cover its weaknesses of Electric, Fighting, Grass, and Rock, we've got Shadow Giratina on the safe swap, which resists Fighting, Electric, and Grass, and then it's just neutral into Rocks. And Shadow Gligar in the back, resisting both Fighting and Electric, and has super effective coverage with Fury Cutter into the Grass, and super effective coverage into the Rock with Dig. So without further ado, let's hop into some battles. Okay, into the first match, we've got Dugong into Marowak. So this is a good lead as Ice Shard and Icy Wind are super effective. The opponent's going to stay in to throw one Mud Slap and then pivot out into a Fortress. But Fortress is going to be met with Shadow Giratina, and this is actually why we're running Shadow Claw on this Pokemon, because if you're going to run it as a safe swap, it kind of needs that neutral play. Some Pokemon might see that dragon typing and expect that they can come in safely with a steel, and that's not really the case with the Shadow Claw form of the Giratina. So I'm now going to make it to back-to-back Ancient Powers. Ancient Power number 2 should be enough to pick up the knockout on the Fortress, unless they put up a shield, and we do get that Shadow Claw farm down. Is the opponent going to come back in with the Marowak, or are they going to show me their third? They're going to come back with the Marowak, so back in comes the Dugong, and you might be wondering, why did I pivot back into my Dugong when I had such a good lead? And the answer for that is I actually didn't really need a switch advantage. I had Shadow Gligar in the back, which has a perfectly fine matchup in the Marowak, double resisting the Mud Slaps, and with neutral coverage with all of our fast and charge moves, whereas the opponent can only go for neutral rock slides at best. So I felt pretty safe in coming back in with the Dugong, knowing that it's just a safe Pokemon in general. We end up luring out a Carbink as well, which is pretty nice, because now back in comes the Giratina, and I actually have neutral coverage with both Shadow Claw and Ancient Power. But the opponent makes a pretty nice catch onto the Marowak with the Ancient Power, which is resisted. But now in comes Gligar. Gligar double resisting the fast move. We get a little bit of lag there, but it's okay. It looks like we did end up catching back up. We know we can live a rock slide fairly comfortably, so I will just let this go. It puts us about into the yellow health range, but now I can look to pick up the knockout with a Night Slash. My opponent has 2 shields left in play, but where do they want to use them? They're going to use them here. And now they're going to under-tap the move in order to outpace. I just have to be aware about the Carbink. It does have energy. It doesn't have enough for a charge move, I don't believe. Or I think it was like 1 short. So I'm forced to actually throw the Night Slash here as soon as they come in. And now in comes Giratina. We end up getting that catch as well. That is absolutely huge. Opponent did end up going for another rock slide. That picks up the knockout on the Giratina. All we have to do is make it to a Night Slash, and I know we can outpace the Marowak. So Night Slash from this range, even though it is resisted, is probably enough to, actually just barely not enough to knock out the Carbink, but we get the Fury Cutter farm down. Back in comes the Marowak, but Marowak's getting fully Fury Cutter farm down as well, and we are able to take a Game 1 win. Into next match, pretty neutral lead. We've got Dugong into Stunfisk. One of the ways I like to play this out is I like to throw 4 Ice Shards and then pivot into my Giratina in order to get the catch. You can wait the turn there after throwing 4 Ice Shards because otherwise it's not perfect. But we end up luring out a Dugong of my opponents. But fortunately, we have super effective coverage here. So Ancient Power coming in clutch in this matchup. Let's see if my opponent respects it with a shield. They do unfortunately put up that shield. And they are going to throw before I get to another charge move, but I don't really have a good way of getting rid of their Dugong if my Giratina doesn't at least land at least 1 Ancient Power. So I'm actually going to put up a shield, and now I'm going to go for an Ancient Power. I know this is not going to be enough to knock out, but I just need to do some chip to this Dugong. The opponent does end up letting that go, which is nice, and if they don't throw, I'm going to make it to yet another Ancient Power, so that is absolutely huge. And now their energy isn't going to go really anywhere. I mean, they actually let that go. We pick up the knockout. We flip switch. That is best case scenario, because now in comes Gligar, a complete wall to energy from the Stunfisk, and they're throwing their energy as well. So maybe they're core broken by the Gligar in the back. We're going to have to find out. The opponent is staying in. They're throwing even more energy. They must be so weak to Gligar in the back. The only thing I can think of is like a Golisopod in the back. Maybe they're worried about an Aerial Ace, but that's why I'm over farming here, making sure I always have energy coming out of this matchup, even though I'm not running Aerial Ace. Here comes a Dig that cleanly knocks out the Stunfisk. What's in the back? It's an Annihilate from the opponent, and I can just start spamming out these Night Slashes. Night Slash number 1, probably going to be let go here, but that is okay by me because I'm going to come back with my Dugong. I'm now going to force them to throw their energy. They do go for the Rage Fist, but the great thing about Dugong is we can immediately lower their attack right back down, and I should be able to make it to another Icy Wind before they're able to get to another charge move. And that is exactly what's going to happen. We make it to another Icy Wind. The opponent knows I have a Night Slash loaded on the Gligar as well. So Icy Wind is actually let go by the opponent, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, we've got Dugong into Dusk Noir. So this is not a great lead, obviously, because Dynamic Punch is super effective, and they will get there at the exact same time as they get to the Icy Wind. However, I'm just going to go for the Icy Wind right away, and the opponent overfarmed, expecting a catch out of the Dugong, which is really nice, because that allows me to connect with an Icy Wind. I'm now going to go for 2 more Ice Shards, go for the catch onto Shadow Giratina. Did we get the double resisted Dynamic Punch catch? Yes, we did. That is absolutely huge. They can now connect with a super effective Shadow Punch. However, their attack is lowered by the Icy Wind, so I know I can live 1, and I will let that go. The opponent is going to stay in this matchup. They're worried about a charge move. In comes a Guzzlord. Unfortunately, I'm unable to make it to the Dragon Claw, which means my Giratina goes down with all of that energy, and now in comes the Dugong. Dugong can, of course, absorb these Brutal Swings pretty comfortably, and we have super effective Ice Shard and Icy Wind coverage. I'm really going to need my Gligar to sweep this endgame. I almost want them to take me out here so that I can get a Fury Cutter head start on my Gligar to get to a Night Slash to pick up the knockout on the Dusk Noir, and then hope that it has play in the back. So in comes the Gligar. We get the full Fury Cutter farm down. Absolutely perfect. Is that Dusk Noir going to come back in? No, they're going to be their third, which is a Blastoise. Now, obviously, seeing a Water type in the back is not ideal for the Shadow Gligar, but this is why Gligar was so good for seasons upon seasons. It is an incredibly neutral Pokemon, and up shields like this, it's not that threatened by the Blastoise here, because rollouts are only neutral. I basically just have to watch for a catch here. Dig will do some pretty large damage, but it's not going to be enough to knock out. However, these Fury Cutters are really adding up. I believe we put them in a range where a Night Slash will KO, which means all I have to do is get to 2 Night Slashes to win this game, and the opponent is going to come back with the Dusk Noir. I'm forced to throw energy pretty much right away, because the opponent would make it to another Shadow Punch, but Night Slash from this range, it picks up the knockout on the Dusk Noir. Back in comes the Blastoise, but Blastoise is going to be outpaced as well. Because of that slight overfarm, and Night Slash from this range should be enough to knock out the Blastoise, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Dugong into Zweilous. So another Dark Dragon, but this time a different form, and picking up a good lead. The opponent's going to safe swap into a Gastrodon, and I come in with Giratina. Now you might be wondering, why am I coming in with Giratina here instead of Gligar? Now Gligar, of course, double resist the Mud Slaps, but Water Pulse is super effective, whereas the opponent's charge moves in this matchup are completely walled. So they're going to have to commit 2 shields in order to flip switch. So I'm going to go for the Dragon Claw. They do end up committing a shield. They're looking for the full farm down. They're not going to get it before I make it to yet another Dragon Claw. Are they really willing to double shield in this matchup in order to get switch? No, they're not. They're going to let that go. Back comes the Zweilous. They get the full farm down. I really didn't need switch, but in the back is a Scizors, or maybe I did, but I have a shield advantage here, so I can just put a shield up. There's no point in baiting here, as I have 2 shields left in play, and the Gligar, I'm going to use both of them here because Gligar is what really needs it in this matchup, because Gligar has good play into both of the remaining Pokemon. So I end up full sending a Dig. I now will put up a shield on the opponent's second Night Slash, and I should be able to make it to another Dig in order to pick up the knockout before they get the full farm down, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Dig number 2 should be enough to knock out the Scizor from this range, and then I can instantly pivot back into my Dugong. Dugong should be able to make it to an Icy Wind before the opponent makes it to a charge move as well, and that is absolutely huge because this is super effective damage and it lowers the opponent's attack. So Icy Wind connects, putting them into the yellow health range. 1 more Ice Shard puts them into the red. They're going to throw some energy here. Let's see how much damage it does to the Dugong. Dark Pulse connects. It does less than half of our HP. The opponent resigns the match, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Dugong into Charge Bug. So this is not a good lead, but we have 2 far better answers in the back that both resist every single thing from the Charge Bug, unless they're running Crunch, but most are not running Crunch. We end up luring out a Diggersby. Now Diggersby, of course, quick attacks are resisted, fire punches resisted, which means the opponent is forced to go for Scorching Sands in this matchup. However, one Scorching Sand should not be enough to knock out, so I am just going to let this go, knowing that I can probably get to 3 Dragon Claws before they can get to 2 more, or get to another Scorching Sands. It's going to be close, maybe not just quite, yeah, because they're going to be on their 6th cycle here. So this is probably going to be the CMP tie from the opponent, unless they decided to go for the extra quick attack. Here comes Dragon Claw number 2. It is the CMP tie, which is pretty unfortunate. But now they're in a range where an Ancient Power might knock out. So even though my fast move is double resisted here, I'm going to look to farm up to the back-to-back Ancient Powers and once again throw on the CMP tie. But the opponent does not go for it, as they knew a Fire Punch from this range probably wouldn't knock out. They end up letting the Ancient Power go through. It knocks out the Diggersby there. Back in comes the Charger Bug. They're going to throw energy here as well. They end up going for a Discharge, which allows me to get to a super effective Ancient Power. And we also have Flip Switch in this matchup. Can we also grab a shield? Yes, we can. Giratina putting in so much work in the mid game. In comes the Gligar. The opponent has a Annihilape in the back, and I kind of blind swap into my Dugong, which is not a great position to be in. That said, I will be able to make it to an Icy Wind. I'm going to force my opponent to throw their energy. If they go for a close combat, so be it, because now they've permanently lowered their defense, which means a Night Slash from this range will be enough to knock out. And I can always respect their energy from the Annihilate, because I don't need to respect the energy from the Charge Bug. So Night Slash does end up grabbing the shield. I will respect this, even if it is just a Rage Fist bait, as it doesn't matter. They're not going to make it to another charge move before I make it to another Night Slash, but they end up pivoting out of that matchup, which means I do need to save some energy when I come out of this one. The Charge Bug already has enough energy for another charge move, but now I can look to overfarm and go for the knockout with the Dig before they make it to another charge move. This should allow me to outpace the Annihilape when it comes back in, and all I have to do is make it to a Dig in order to pick up the knockout on the Annihilape, and we're going to easily outpace the opponent, as they had basically no residual energy. So Dig from this range, it's Shadow, it's Stab, it picks up the knockout on the Annihilape. After one more Fury Cutter farm down, and we are able to take that win, and that was a 5-0 set, believe it or not, with this team. Now into the next match, we've got Dugong into Charge Bug once again. Gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna pivot out into the Giratina, and the opponent ends up safe switch or responding to the Giratina safe swap, which is a Shadow Feraligatr. Now this is obviously not a good matchup, as the Shadow Claws are super effective. Hydro Cannon is of course resisted in this matchup, and it probably wouldn't knock out from this range, but it's probably going to put me in one Shadow Claw farm down. But they do end up going for the Ice Beam to pick up the knockout. Back in comes the Dugong. It is kind of nice that we lured out the Feraligatr here, as obviously Gligar does not want to see this Pokemon in the back. Hydro Cannon will connect. That is resisted damage. I will now look to pick up the knockout with a Drill Run before they're able to make it to another charge move, and Drill Run from this range should exactly do that. So down goes the Feraligatr. Now in comes the Gligar, unable to flip switch in the previous matchup, but guess who's in the back? It's a Kanto Marowak, and it's a non-shadow as well, so they can absorb this energy a lot better, but they're doing even less damage with their Mud Slaps. Rock Slide is neutral here, so I actually will respect it with a shield, as this is the last neutral thing that my opponent has against the Shadow Gligar. They are just absolutely core broken by this Pokemon in the back. I'm now at back-to-back digs before the opponent can even make it to Rock Slide number 2. What does the opponent want to do? They do want to end up letting that go, and they will make it to another charge move, but I believe this is only enough for a Bone Club, so I can just let this go, as it is double resisted damage. That just tickles the Gligar. Back in comes the Charge Bug, but Charge Bug will be hit with a Dig straight away. They have to call a bait here if they want to win this game. They end up letting that go. I mean, they're going to lose either way, because I can let this go as well, and it should not be enough to knock out. X-Scissor is resisted damage. I will be able to make it to yet another Dig before the opponent can even get the full farm down. And Dig from this range, is it enough to knock out the Charge Bug? No, but it does put them into the red health range. We end up getting the catch on a Dugong. I'm anticipating that the opponent did go for the Discharge in anticipation, and they did, so that is a very nice play by the opponent, recognizing maybe that was their only win con, was anticipating that switch. They end up making it to another charge move, and Discharge is actually not enough to knock out, which means we get the Ice Shard farm down of both of the remaining Pokemon, and we are able to take that win. So yeah, that is Shadow Giratina, Dugong, and Shadow Gligar. I think all of the components of this team worked out really well, especially on Go Battle Day, for what I was seeing. That said, I don't know if this is a team I would recommend for climbing. I think all of these Pokemon have kind of fallen out of the meta kind of for good reason. I mean, Giratina, its pacing was a little bit slower this season. Gligar doesn't have that stab coverage that it used to with Wing Attack and Aerial Ace. And it's kind of shut down by things like Corviknight, which, I mean, we tried to lure out with the Giratina save swap, and then you've got Dugong in the lead, which is very neutral into a lot of the Pokemon in this meta, but even things like the Kanto Marowak, they pace to the rock side at the exact same pace that you get to the Icy Wind, so it's kind of an awkward matchup. You have to either call a bait or put up a shield early in a matchup where you don't really want to be committing shields. So even though I liked all the components of this team, I don't know if I recommend it for climbing. That said, I do want to say thank you to the expert trainer members on this channel, Benny Hemlock, Dr. Green Mustache, Eliana, Perry G, Blue Nation, Peter Rushworth, Alright Right 504, Jobbus Clips, and Sons of Code, as well as an extra special thank you to the legend trainer members on this channel, Andrew Pitten, Moosachoop, Noodleman, Speedster, Estros, Fast Eddie Boss, CD Slaskis, and Star Bonsai. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace!